Good evening, everybody. Michael Soothing here. I thought what I would talk about tonight. I have vinyl record collection, great big albums. And I came across them recently, and I pulled a whole bunch of them off the top of the stack. And I thought what we would do is kind of go through these albums and talk about those good old times and what that music was all about. Now, some of you younger folks are going to recognize some of these names, but you're not going to recognize all of these names because some of this music was from the 70s, maybe even late 60s, I think mostly 70s and 80s. So I think I'll get right to it and talk about it a little bit. And by the way, I haven't gone through these in advance and to see what I have here. And this is just a portion of my old collection from decades ago. So it will be a surprise to me as it is to you. Haven't planned any kind of dialogue, just gonna kind of ramble through it as an overview. But if it's interesting to you, then maybe I'll come back sometime and spend a little time talking about the more interesting aspects of the bands and the musicians and what was going on back then with their concerts and everything. For this time, though, we'll just do a ramble, if that's okay. So the first one up here I see one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and like many musicians of the 70s, die before his time of an overdose, like Janis Joplin and all those others. This one, Jimi Hendrix. And this is one of his most famous albums, Are You Experienced? And it's got a lot of very good songs on it. Let's get the album out and look at it a little bit. See if there's any artwork on the album itself. Doesn't look like it. Don't see any artwork on the album. But I'll tell you a little bit about the song list. By the way, I'll tell you something about how we did stereos back then, okay? Not like today where you got a little MP3 player or your iPhone or something and you listen to music. Do you know back then, back in the day, as they say now, we would go out and invest a substantial portion of our income because we were audiophiles, and we would get a big, giant amplifier, put out like 600 watts, right? And a preamplifier to put a pure, perfect signal into it. Different inputs and outputs on it for your tape deck and your, of course, your LP player, your turntable. And then this thing you'd have an equalizer, so that you could set the bass and the mid-range and the treble and sometimes many other bands in between. I had an equalizer that was, I think, a 10-band equalizer. So you could set the sound up any way you want. And then you'd have these giant speakers, the size of your house practically. I had these things called HPM 300s or something. Big, giant Pioneer speakers with big, giant, 15, 18-inch woofers on them. Then there would be a mid-range, about this big speaker. Then there would be a dome, high mid-range, and then there would be a tweeter, and then there would be this dome filament super tweeter. I got to tell you, and then you'd have a high, expensive turntable, and the turntable would have a tone arm and a stylus on it, and that stylus, just the needle, cost like $150, which in today's dollars would be like $1,000. Okay, so we spent a lot of money on our stereo, but man, did it sound good. Make every MP3 song you ever heard in your life sound like total crap by comparison. I hate to tell you. But those days are gone. We don't have those kind of stereos now. I have a good setup now, but it doesn't sound like what I had back then. Anyway, I used to take such good care of these records, and when I get them out now, I remember, didn't like any pops, didn't like any scratches. So what I would do, you have to pardon me, because I'm probably never going to play this thing ever again. Nonetheless, out of force of habit, because I would be struck dead otherwise, I never handled these things on the surface. I tried to avoid that. Always handled them like this, like the edge, And so that's why if you look at one of my record albums from 40 years ago and stuff, you won't see any scratches or any mars or any imperfections. We were that anal about it. Me and my audiophile friends. In fact, we would have a thing called a disc washer, which was a common type of device that would take the static charge off the surface and clean your album without putting any damage on it. Had a special kind of fiber filament that was designed to not scratch or damage the surface of an album like this. See, I still can't touch it. I'm brainwashed from the habits from back then. And I would always put them back in their vinyl sleeve when I was done, very carefully, like this. I can handle it when it's in the vinyl sleeve, I just can't do it when it's out. So I never used one of those turntable automatic disc changer things, because we wanted to do one album at a time, that's how it went. Anyway, the artwork in the late 60s, early 70s, kind of psychedelic, it was always kind of like this style. There were a bunch of bands that would do this, had this kind of very distinctive artwork, which you have seen, here and there when you look at vintage stuff, So I'll put that back in there, back in his album cover. Let's see what a couple of the songs were he had on here. He had Purple Haze, which even you young people probably heard of. Very good one. And a song called Hey Joe, Hey Joe, where you going with that gun in your hand? It's the name of that song. And Deep Purple did that song also. I must admit, Hendrix had the more authentic version, but I like Deep Purple's version better. But anyway, so there's Jimi Hendrix, one of the greatest stars of his day. Let's see what we got next here. We've got a guy that they used to call the Boss, Bruce Springsteen. Chicks really liked him a lot. I wasn't a big fan, but I liked some of his stuff. Born in the USA, and he had some. What's on here? This one's got I'm on Fire. That was a really good song. Bobby Jean and Dancing in the Dark was a pretty good hit, big hit back then. Early 80s, I think, if I recall correctly, for this one. And some of these, some have artwork on the inner cover or photographs of things, so little slice of life photographs, from his band, you can see there. I'm not going to go into a bunch of descriptions about these guys, because that would be for another video. This is more like overview, So we'll keep it short and sweet for most of these and not get too down into detail. Then of course there was the Steve Miller Band. I don't know if you've heard of them. Nice artwork and everything on the cover. And this had some Book of Dreams is the name of this album. And it had Threshold on it, Wintertime. Swing Town is a very famous tune. And so if you look that up on YouTube or something, then you could get a feel for what this band is like. Steve Miller Band, very good. I didn't like some of their stuff, but I like about a third of it, I'd say. Jungle Love, you know. How come all the songs back then were love songs, you know? I don't know. A lot of stuff like that. Or political songs, things like that. Wish Upon a Star. True Fine Love. My Own Space. I don't remember what that song's about, but I might have to listen to it, because you know what? I like to have my own space. Don't you? Do you like to go to, have time alone sometime? Some people like to be around other people all the time. I find that can be interesting sometimes, but sometimes it's a real bore, and you just want to be alone with your own thoughts, do stuff. Now, I don't know if I want to use the word eclectic, okay, because I like a very, very wide variety of music. So you would be shocked if you saw what kind of variety. And I'm not going to show you all of it, maybe in another video. But here we have Count Basie. So this is a jazz album. Kind of dig the artwork on the cover too. So one of the great things about these albums was the artwork. They had all kinds of Okay. So this has a lot of tunes, about 20 songs, about 25 songs, and Shoeshine Boy and Evening and a whole bunch of things. Love Me or Leave Me, Live and Love Tonight. And like I told you, lots of love songs on all these albums, or at least that's the inspiration for many of them. So is this a 2? Yeah. Lots of LPs back in this day would be a 2-album set. Not a lot, but a few. So this one is 2 albums, as you can see here. Hopefully that's not too loud. Some of them would come with paper cover, and some with, like plastic sleeve. I haven't seen this album in maybe 25 years, at least. Perfect condition, not a fingerprint or scratch on it. You're going to think I'm really anal retentive about this, but see, this is how we were back then. We just took really good care of our music. And with vinyl LP records, if you wanted them to really sound good, that's what you had to do, because they would degrade if you used a cheap needle on it, like a cheap turntable with a cheap needle. You would degrade the music very quickly. It would start taking shavings off the vinyl that's in the groove. And the groove is where all the music is stored, little tiny ridges that has all of the spectrum. By the way, these vinyl albums had a much wider dynamic range than CDs did, actually. These things could reproduce from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, okay? So, whereas your typical CD is more like, 40 hertz to 30 hertz maybe, to a cutoff of around 12,000 or 14,000, something like that. So even though you might not hear above that range, you miss the presence of all the harmonics and everything that would mix in, okay? So, Yeah, this thing has two different, that's why they got so many songs on the song list. Look at this song list. Pretty long for an LP. But that's not going to impress you much, because now you can put 10,000 songs on your MP3 player, right? Do you know, when I first got into music, first thing that we had was a little turntable that would play 45 RPM singles. You got one song, then you had to start again with another record. The thing was only about that big around, okay? So, and that was kind of annoying, you know, because if you left it on there, you'd hear the same song over and over. You know, and those singles, they were pretty expensive. Even back then, it was like 90 cents or $1 for a single. And, you know, you can pay $1 now for a downloaded piece of music, but we usually pay a lot less, or we rip it off somehow, don't we, for MP3. We rip them off of our albums and CDs and things. Well, here's one. A lot of you will not recognize this band. This band, Emerson, Lake, and Palmer. All right. Now, go look these guys up on the internet sometime or on YouTube. In my opinion, this was the best collection of musicians, all in one band, that ever lived. But they're not that well known, except by really hardcore classic rock fans from the 70s, like myself. And if you listen to all their stuff, wide variety, you would hear songs you recognize today, because some of their stuff's been, you know, ripped off and redone. This here looked like a live album. I went and saw them in concert. One of the most incredible concerts I've ever seen. Back in those days, there wasn't much electronics in the music, but these guys were one of the first bands to really get into the Moog synthesizer and make good use of it. So they would use, but anyway, I was going to tell you about these musicians. Sometime I'll give you a longer, I'll just do Emerson, Lake, and Palmer, ASMR. Keith Emerson would play everything. This guy was insane. At the Woodstock concert, he gets up on the stage, gets on a piano, right? Piano keyboard, you know, big upright. It's got a bar going through the center of it, and it's on a thing that turns around, and the whole thing starts rotating, you know, so he's going upside down, and he never misses a note. And he might be the best keyboardist I've ever heard. That's a bold claim, I know, but you would have to listen to some of his stuff. Sometime look him up. He stopped doing music, and I don't know why. He was one of the best. And what Emerson, Lake, and Palmer were known for is that they would play everything in their particular niche of expertise. So Keith Emerson wouldn't just play keyboard, piano, and synthesizer. He would play anything that was a key percussion type instrument, you know. I mean, he would play xylophones, and you name it. He'd have like 8 different kind of keyboards up there. A grand piano, a pipe organ, you know, a regular keyboard, a Moog synthesizer with 4 levels of keys, you know. This guy, and he would wail away on all of them. Sometimes he'd be playing the organ with one hand and the piano with another. Those are the kind of, and he would do it brilliantly. I mean, and I never saw a guy that could play so fast on a keyboard. You'd have to watch some of his stuff to see what I'm talking about. in their early days, he'd get really crazy. He'd take the upright piano and pull it down on top of himself on the stage. He'd be squished under it playing, quite a bit, And then, of course, Carl Palmer, the percussionist, is, in my opinion, the best drum player of all time. Now, a lot of drum player types and music aficionados are going to start telling you about other guys they think are better, have more beat, this, that, the other thing. But Palmer was incredible in concert and with his band. And like Keith Emerson, he played everything. He would have on stage a giant set of drums, of course, full set of drums, and every kind of cymbal you ever heard of in your life. He'd have bongos up there. He'd have percussion instruments you never heard of. He'd have mariachis. And he, of course, the signature thing about the band, he'd have a big, giant brass gong behind him, or 3 or 4 of them, with the ELP logo on it, and every now and then he'd pick up one of the big sticks with the ball on the end, and bam on that thing, and, at the appropriate time, of course. So I highly recommend, if you've never heard of these guys and you would like to know what people were listening to when musicians played actual music instead of just being a social phenomenon, you might want to go back and check out. I know that sounds a little bit, musically elitist or something. I don't mean it that way. There are some good musicians today, certainly. But let me tell you, you won't believe it if you listen to some of the stuff. Okay, and this is where we get into the variety thing. See, sometimes I like just mellow stuff that was more folk music. And so I have this Simon and Garfunkel album, Bookends. I had a few of their albums, Scarborough Fair and stuff like that. What songs are on this thing? Let's see. A song called America, Saved the Life of My Child. If you can find that online, very interesting tune they did. But these guys did Bridge Over Troubled Waters and stuff like that. They did a famous song called At the Zoo. It was a very good tune. Let's see if any of these albums have any artwork on the album itself. Carefully reach into. Nope, not on this one. Just a label, right? So we'll put that back. And it's, what am I going to do with all these albums? You know what I think I'm going to do? I don't have a turntable anymore, of course. Almost no one does. But I think what I'll do is get one of those turntables you can buy online, Amazon, and it has a USB output on it. Plug it right into your computer and turn your whole vinyl album collection into MP3s or WMV files. Make my own CDs or MP3s. CDs also have a much better dynamic range than MP3s. I know you younger people aren't going to understand this because you're not used to the audiophile mindset, But I listen to MP3s. I have them. I have, in my car player, and I have listened to them online and stuff. I gotta tell you though, compared to a good CD with a good system, they sound horrible, okay? They're warbly. You may not notice it if you're not used to it, but I gotta stop. I gotta get off that kick, okay? Like, I'm gonna sound like a real, anal nutty, perfectionist or something, but you older people know what I'm talking about. Okay, so classic rock fans. So here we have, of course, the Doors. Now, I think even all you young folks know the Doors. You know, they had all kind of famous tunes. And, you know, the women really loved them and everything, of course. So, spin-off things have been done on the Doors, and there's probably tribute bands running around playing their stuff today still. They had some interesting artwork on the back, and show the band there, you know. Let's see if they got anything on the album. No, this one had 13. They had some other albums that were probably a bit better than this one, but this has some good stuff. The Crystal Ship, People Are Strange. You know, I think they were right about that, you know. And Light My Fire, very famous tune, about 1970 or something like that. You know, guy died young, of course, and like so many of them, you know. What else? Hello, I Love You. That was a very famous tune. Wild Child, The Unknown Soldier. The Doors, of course, kind of characterized the rock music of the Vietnam War era. And the Vietnam War vet guys listened to this kind of stuff all the time when they were over there. That's why if you watch a movie like Platoon, they're playing a lot of Doors songs in the background and stuff. So they were big back then. And they're still pretty famous and well known today. Okay, here's a very famous band. The Who. And this is Tommy, the rock opera, you know, Pinball Wizard. So you may recognize that song without knowing who did it. Well, it was The Who. Look at some of these guys. It's just a double album. Yeah, it is. Okay, so first if we open this, we see some interesting artwork inside. I can never get this right when I'm backwards with the camera. See? Interesting kind of artwork. Let's open another one. Oh yeah, see? This is symbolic here. See how this fist is like punching through? Let me get this aligned properly. Let's quit being such a dork, okay? So, see how that fist is punching through from one side to the other. That's because that signifies Tommy having his breakthrough where he comes back to full live consciousness. He's sort of like a super autistic, brilliant, idiot savant who is able to play pinball brilliantly, even though he's deaf, dumb, and blind. More of the artwork I'll show you inside this album cover. See that? Kind of interesting. I'm probably moving it around too fast. I'll try to be a little slower. Okay. So this is a 2-album set, and I think this is my favorite rock opera of all time. So I see why I saved this one. No artwork on this album itself. And again, record in perfect condition. This is making me very nostalgic for the past. Make me wish I was 22 again, you know, when I see this stuff. And I'm going to put this back. I hope the sliding is not too irritating. when I watch ASMR videos by some of the content creators that I really like, I don't really like it when they slide their fingers on paper like, that. I'm not really into that at all. But I like the girls who do the tapping, the female ASMR that have nails on their fingers. I don't have, but and I kind of like the sound of paper and plastic and stuff when they have their fingers doing the thing. I'm always telling them, but no one ever listens. I like it if they put lots of bangles on their wrist, but none of them ever do that. So, but then we're off topic, aren't we? You don't mind if I stray off topic a little bit and talk about ASMR while I'm getting all nostalgic for these old albums, right? Tommy Rock Opera, 2-album set. I highly recommend it. It's not the most brilliant piece of music, but I think overall it's the best rock opera. It's got some great harmonies and great mixes of instruments and voice harmony. And plus it tells a story all the way through, and about Tommy. Who did, it was Elton John did the movie, Tommy. Here we have, oh my gosh, don't tell any of my old friends. I committed record album treatment heresy here, and it's probably a death penalty offense. Let me show you what happened to this album. It got stuck back in the cardboard sleeve without being put into its paper sleeve. And this probably happened like 35 years ago, because that's how long it's been since this album got played, I think. And this is a feint, but we're going to fix this problem right now. We're going to correct this so that all will be well with the force and the harmonization of the universe again. So let's take this out. Makes me cringe seeing that vinyl scrape across that cardboard. Right? But it still doesn't have fingerprints or anything. Maybe I can blame it on someone else. My ex-girlfriend, put it back that way or something. If my old friend, Mr. Maxwell, won't say his whole name, saw this, I gotta have an excuse, So, what do we got in here? Oh, this was like, here they were doing advertising. This was before the days of putting ads on everything and internet sites. No internet existed back when these albums were made. There was no such thing as an internet. There was no video games. There was no cell phones. There was no technology at all. Basically, there was some, but it was very basic. We had a TV that had like 12 channels on it, okay? And 10 of those 12 were an absolute bore fest. At least 10, usually 12 out of the 12. So we like to listen to our music, If you were a young guy, young girl, whatever, teenager, young 20s, this was, your thing, music. Bridge Over Troubled Water was, of course, probably the most well-known Simon and Garfunkel album, or at least the best-known single. But they had a lot of big hits before that, Scarborough Fair and all kind of things like that. But this was where they kind of progressed into a new style before Art Garfunkel got weird and before Paul Simon decided, he was a reggae guy, Don't you think it's a little odd for Paul Simon to be a reggae guy? Like what he gonna do? Grow big dreadlocks and everything? But that's what he into, after this band. So they were a great folk band, They did some of the stuff that was done by folk artists before them. Okay, so I like classical music too, even Broadway tunes and stuff. I told you, wide variety. So some of the big movie theme albums, this is Dr. Zhivago, one of the big blockbuster films of the late 60s. I don't even know if it is stereo. But notice how it says here, sound great in stereo. See there? You know why they said that? When this came out, a lot of albums weren't even stereo yet. Some of them were monaural. So, this was a fantastic soundtrack. I remember just thinking about this. I can remember how the film opens with this great background music that kind of takes you into Russia and the natural scene of the trees and the far north, before they show a young Zhivago with his mother just died and they're lowering her into the ground. So, wow, this thing's all stuck or something. Wow. I highly recommend this film because not only does it have a great story, but it was one of the greatest novels of all time, of course, and one of the best adaptions of a novel, Russian novelist, and a great director, Boris Pasternak, author, David Lean. They show you a few of the scenes in here. This was the getaway that they went to, where it's all frozen there. See, this was the little house they escaped to. Well, they called it little compared to their place in Moscow. This is all set in the Russian Revolution. It's all about Dr. Zhivago and how things progress as the Russian Revolution occurs. I remember a great line in it when Zhivago comes back from World War I, where they forced him to be a medic. And then the Red Army forced him to join them in World War I. And he comes back home, and the communists have taken over his house because it was a big mansion, and they're telling him, there was room for a lot of families in here and stuff. And Zhivago's agreeing with them, and he says, yeah, this is fair, And this Russian communist commissar comes up to him and says, you're to report for work immediately. And Zhivago says, because, he's a famous doctor, of course, and he says, you report to the hospital tomorrow. And Zhivago says, of course, I've always worked. And then Zhivago says, I understand there's typhus. And the guy says, there's no typhus in communist Russia. And Zhivago says, oh, then I guess there's no rush for me to report to work. Commissar gets all indignant and he says, would it please you if I say there's typhus? And Zhivago says, yes, it would please me. And the guy says, why? And Zhivago says, because it is so. See, he just hated lies. He didn't like the whole thing about, he was sympathetic to the communists' goals, but he didn't like the let's pretend and lie about everything part of it, which I thought was interesting. Pasternak and, we'll get off that topic because we're not trained to go deeply into stuff, are we? So here we have more from the 80s, okay? Grover Washington, famous saxophone, jazz musician. Very good one, too. Great stuff he did. Can't remember the name of all his tunes. That's a pretty simple design on the slip cover. Right there. Let's see if he's got anything on the back. All right, check this out. Inside moves, secret sounds, jet stream. Those are the names of some of the tunes. They go on. They're pretty long, the songs. Many of them are 8 to 10 minutes, which is the way a lot of jazz tunes are. Here's another. This was my favorite movie when I was 16 years old. 17, something like that. 16, I think. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, So I had to get the soundtrack, even though I didn't really like most of the music on it. I wasn't a Burt Bacharach fan, but it just because I liked the movie so much. So that's, of course, Paul Newman. By the way, this film, there's Paul Newman there, see? And Catherine Ross back there played Etta. And then, of course, Robert Redford there. This is the movie that really launched Robert Redford to fame. Paul Newman was already a pretty good, famous actor in his own right with many previous blockbusters. This is the movie that launched Catherine Ross. And there's a scene in the film that I remember quite well with her, but I'm not going to describe it right now. You'll have to go watch it for yourself. Anyway, it's a little surprise scene. A lot of you have probably seen the film. Great film for its day, and loosely based on the true story, of course, of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and the Wild Bunch, they called them. Okay, now you're going to recognize this band, I guarantee it, even though they were big in the 60s. When I was really small, I remember their music from when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and it stuck in my head back then. I became a music lover because of this band, mainly. And that, of course, is the Beatles. Okay, so here we have Sgt. Pepper's Sgt. Pepper album. Very distinctive style. And the great thing about the Beatles, of course, they were very, very prolific. Whether you like their stuff or you don't like their stuff, they did about 10 different styles, and their music evolved very quickly. And really, John and Paul did an incredible number of creative projects and songs. I mean, they were really amazing. Another rock and roll musician died before his time. John Lennon got shot by that crazy John Hinckley guy. Or wait, or is he the one who shot Reagan? Oh, I think Hinckley shot Reagan. Maybe I forgot who shot who. I feel a little embarrassed now. But, there's Ringo Starr, and then you got, of course, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison. And they all made solo albums too, eventually. Some better than others. Okay, now here's a crazy thing you might not know about. I can't resist telling you about it. when I was young, late teens, there was one of those crazy memes going around, a conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney had died, and they were faking his stuff, but they were leaving hints on all the albums that he was dead. Okay? So, like on this one, for example, see how Paul's turned around backwards and the other three Beatles facing forward? Okay. So, and it's like every album, these crazy freaks would find some clue that Paul, Sir Paul now, was actually really dead. I have to have a sip. Excuse me a moment. Oh, that's better. I don't really do whisper videos much. You know, I'm curious about something. This camera has a stereo mic, but not a binaural, widely separated fancy one, and I don't have an independent one. Let me see if I can do that crazy whisper thing everyone does and get separation for a second. Let's see. So, if I talk on this side and then switch to this side, can you tell? I don't know if you can tell that it goes from one side to the other. I guess we'll both find out when I put this up to edit it. I'm not going to do much editing because this is a ramble video. Probably won't do any editing. Probably just upload it raw. Sometimes it's better to just leave things in their raw, uncut form. Okay, here we have another Beatle album. Famous Beatle album, The Yellow Submarine. And I don't remember the artist's name who did all of this artwork for the album cover. And for the movie by the same name, they put out a movie animated feature. They had blue meanies. Is there any blue meanies here? Yeah, there's one. It's a blue meanie right there. See the blue? And they had, some very distinctive and unusual artwork in the film. What do we got on the back here? Yeah, some more graphics. That psychedelic graphics from the 60s. And some of the different kind of characters. See the dude with the apple, the green apple? So let's see if this album was done on the Apple label. Get this out. Check it out. I don't know if they had gone to Apple Studios yet. I think they had a Capitol Record contract before they had their own studio. Let's see what we got here. Oh, yep. See, by this time, they had gone to the Apple record label, you can see there. And we should have the green apple on the other side, which I see we do. You know, I'm not just joshing with you when I say I haven't looked at these albums in decades. You and I are looking at them together for the first time. I don't know how many, 20, 30 years. So, what I did originally, long ago, when cassette tape decks first came out in high quality, is I converted all these albums into cassette tapes so that I could play them in my car, and I could put 2 or 3 albums on one tape, So I had a super high quality cassette as a part of my system, and so I really haven't listened. Then eventually it was CDs, So, and I got a lot of my favorite albums on CD eventually. All right, let's see what we got here. Oh, here's another Paul is Dead album with a clue on it. The Beatles' famous album, Abbey Road. And there they are, crossing the road. You know what the clue is here? I'm going to show you for a second. Paul is this guy, of course. Can you see? That's Paul. Okay, so I'm going to show you real slow. See if you can see the Paul is Dead clue. All right? So we see George, and we see Paul, we see Ringo right there, and eventually we see, of course, John right there, right? Any idea? He's the only one barefoot, okay? The only one of these Beatles that's barefoot in this record album. So, there you go. And of course, this album had some great hits on it. Here Comes the Sun and Come Together, great tune. Octopus Garden, I never really liked that one very much. I think that was a Ringo Starr tune. Not sure. Golden Slumbers was good. And Sun King, that's been updated. You may have seen a modern movie version that has a lot of Beatles stuff on it. And they do a collage of things like Sun King and Here Come the Sun. That was a George Harrison production there. Very good. Oh, here's another Beatle album. This one, of course, is known as the White Album because, for obvious reasons, it's hard to even see the Beatles logo on it, isn't it? Where is that logo? There it is. There's the logo. Can you see it? I don't know if you can see it. Right there. Oh, there we go. Get the light to reflect on it just a bit. And this had a lot of famous songs. This, of course, was also when they were with the Apple label, as you can see. This has Blackbird, famous tune. I used to know how to play that on my guitar. Had that great acoustic guitar riff, If I had my guitar here, I'd play it for you. I sold my guitar. Now I kind of regret it because I was never playing it. And Martha, My Dear, Rocky Raccoon. That's been done as a remake by somebody or other. Kind of a rude song here called Why Don't We Do It in the Road? Of course, you can guess who penned that one. That would be John Lennon, who was the song creator on that one. So this was a double album. So I got one out. Let's get the other one out. Let's see. This one didn't have on it. This one has, this has the hardcore version of Revolution. And if you don't know that song, that was another John Lennon creation. And I like that tune. And on the very same side, he's got a slow version called Revolution number 9, more like an unplugged version. The first one starts off with a really hardcore electric guitar riff, which is a little crunchy, and it's really delicious to listen to. It starts off and kind of na 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 na, and John Lennon. This is an AMSR video. My apologies. John Lennon does this scream at the beginning of the song. So, got carried away. This album cover, not in as good a shape, is starting to come apart just a little bit, which I find disturbing. Some of these, I never checked mine. Maybe I should. But do you see how this is pasted on? This white is pasted on. Some of these, you can peel this off, and there's a photo of John and Yoko under there, naked or something. And if you have one of those, because they're very rare, then it's worth a ton of money. I suppose I should figure out if there's some way I can check that. But I doubt this is one of those, and I'll tell you why. There's a number down here, see that? And that number indicates to me, when I read it, that this might be a pressing. If this is the number that was run of these albums, it would be 2,514,000. So only the very first albums in this series had, the graphic under that white. But some people complained or something, so the record label covered it with a white sticky, iron on or something. And those are very rare if people find them, and then worth a lot of money. All right, so, but of course, when I was a very small kid, one of the first Beatle albums was Meet the Beatles, okay? See how different they look when they first, and their music was completely different originally than what it progressed to later. This was where they got their start on the Ed Sullivan Show, as far as getting big in America and stuff. I Want to Hold Your Hand. Very, very simple tune. Just repeating that lyric all over and over. This Boy, like a slow ballad. It Won't Be Long. That's a great song, actually. All My Lovin'. These were actually all love songs. And when these guys would come over to the States or wherever they went and, go show up in Candlestick Park or, some big music venue or some stadium someplace, they played a lot of sports stadiums. It didn't sound very good, but it didn't matter because all the girls would be screaming at the top of their lungs till they would have laryngitis for a year. It was an odd phenomenon back then. And if you watch any of the old clips of the first Beatle tours, you'll see them screaming and fainting and, all that kind of thing. All right. Here's another famous film from that time. First, I gave you the clue already. Now I can't ask you to guess. First great sci-fi film that had excellent special effects. Very innovative for its day, and that, of course, was 2001, The Space Odyssey. So this had a lot of classical stuff on it, like Tchaikovsky, and then some real weird stuff, too. And it starts off with that also spake Zarathustra song that has a real low bass rumbling pipe organ note, but it has to be from a pipe organ that has that low 18 cycle pipe, big giant pipe to make that low note. Rumbles so low that a lot of people can't hear it, but they can feel it. So sometime I should just talk about this movie and give you some details on how they made it, how they did the special effects. Because I actually read the book, back then, and I read a book on how they did all the effects in the movie. Like when they're weightless and anti-gravity, flying up to the space station, right? Remember this, the flight attendant on that Pan Am rocket. By the way, I've always been fascinated with space, and I'm in the rocket science business, kind of. Satellites, actually. But satellites, have retro rockets on them. So technically, they qualify as rocket science. They have a main thruster and some other little bitty thrusters on them to keep them oriented just right. That's just some of the mechanisms that we use to keep them pointed at Earth the way we want them to be. We use things like momentum wheels, and all kinds of other stuff like that, kind of exotic. Sometime I'll do an ASMR video on satellites and rocket technology, and I will put you right to sleep, okay? So, here's another beetle. Man, I see on my counter there, right there. Can you see my counter? No, because you can't see my little display, but I can see it. It says I've gone an hour already. I could go 3 hours talking about this stuff, but I'm gonna have to stop soon, because I gotta go to sleep, get up tomorrow, and face another 12 hours of a rocket science job. I manage a big group of engineers, and it's a very difficult job because they're all over the world working on exotic stuff that we bring into my company to put on to spacecraft, which is what we call the big giant satellites we build. It's called a spacecraft. And I won't get into all that now. Anyway, another Beatle album, the Revolver album. This is when they started to move out of kind of pop rock, sort of, what would you call that, early stuff. It's not Elvis kind of stuff. Anyway, the skiffle band stuff they did in Great Britain. And here they were starting to get really innovative and break out into new stuff, like For No One, this song, and Eleanor Rigby, and well, they did Yellow Submarine on this album. So this is where it came from. The Yellow Submarine album came later, but this is where they did the tune first, was on this album. Let's see if they were on the Apple label yet. Yeah, they were on the Apple label. And we didn't look at the other one that was here before. I think that was Capitol. Yeah, Capitol Records there. So that was before they had the Apple Studio. George Harrison did an album on his own. Another guy died too young. He was in a band at the end with some other famous musicians, like Eric Clapton, and what's that other guy's name that could sing so high, that was crooning, popular guy from the 60s. Anyway, the Traveling Willoughbys, George Harrison. And then when he died, they did some songs with him and some music videos. And after he died, they did kind of a tribute song. They had already laid down his vocal tracks, so they completed the music video, but instead of showing him singing, which he had already completed, the vocal tracks, they just showed an empty rocking chair, where he was supposed to be in that section of the video. Made me kind of sad. And anyway, what was the name of that song where they did that? You could find it on YouTube. I think it's called It's All Right. Oh, of course, very famous band from 70s, the Moody Blues. I think these guys still play. They still have a band going around. Has one or two original members. And oh look, this is the Threshold of a Dream album. And what I just found here has this big insert, which I don't know what it is. Oh, I see. They put all their music lyrics into this cool insert here, so that we can see done in high quality script and stuff. See, let me get this right. I just have trouble with this. See how they did that? So they've got every song and credits. Quite interesting. This has In the Beginning and Send Me No Wine and Never Lazy Day. That's a famous tune, right? The Dream, The Voyage. These guys were well named because they really do have mood music. It kind of transports you into a different place and different time. And it can pull on your emotions more than most music can. Some of their stuff, like when I listen to a tune like In Your Wildest Dreams, I think that's the name of the song, it does take me back and pull on some emotions that I had earlier in my life. It's about your lost loves from when you were young. D-Ram. I didn't remember the label name, D-Ram. But I think I gotta wrap it up because I've been going way too long. I think I'm just gonna, let's look at the, this just shows the band, Justin Hayward and Ray Thomas and Mike Ponder and all these guys. Lots of bands back then. I don't know if I have any CCR albums handy at the moment. Creedence Clearwater Revival. But they would often do shots like that for their album artwork. Show the whole band standing around someplace. And I have them in my collection someplace. Just showing you a few of what I got. I had a lot of albums. I spent a fortune on vinyl back then. These albums would be anywhere from $5 or $6 to $12 if it was a double album, $14. And in today's money, that'd be like $100 an album, if you bring forward the cost of inflation, Back then, you know what a gallon of gas cost me back then? Here in California, where it's expensive, it was 30 cents. 30 cents a gallon back then. Do you know just the tax on gas now in California is 60 cents a gallon? So just just the tax alone is double what the whole cost of the whole gallon was back then. So let's see if there's anything else here. See, I even have music like pop, pop dance stuff. This was flash dance. I don't know why I have this one. Is there anything on it I liked? Let me see. Maniac. I think that was the only one. Kind of like that. But that was probably because I liked watching the girl dance and have the water, drop all over her and stuff. What a Feeling was okay. Very 80s, Yeah, so see, it just shows you, jazz, classic rock, pop rock, Broadway, music themes. And now we have classical, 1812, Tchaikovsky. I think I'm going to stop there, because otherwise this is going to go on for hours and hours. But anyway, I think in a future video, I'll continue on through more of the album collection. And what I'll also do is maybe do ASMR in future, where I focus on one theme, like one band, and go more deeply into that band and their lives and what was good about their music and what wasn't, and what was their innovations and what happened to them and stuff like that. So until then, I hope that you're relaxed, and I hope that you're asleep by now, or if not asleep, I hope you're in a non-tensed state, because I know I am. I'm ready to go watch somebody else's ASMR video and go to sleep. You know what my favorite artist is? I'm not going to tell you right now, but someday I will. I'm going to do a review. Okay. All right. Take care, everyone. Night.